How do you capture a single human story that resonates simultaneously across Central America, South Africa, and Bangladesh? When you're running a massive multi-market campaign for a stakeholder as complex as the European Commission, how do you balance strict client KPIs with raw, authentic storytelling? And what does it actually take to build the kind of trust that allows you to crush global benchmarks? Welcome to the Branded Content That Works podcast, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on the world's most successful brand partnerships. I'm your host, Tina Holmgaard, and in today's episode, we are truly going global. Joining us is Hayley Anne Sharp, the Managing Director of Vox Media International. Hayley takes us behind the scenes of a remarkable multi-market campaign with the European Commission. We'll dive deep into how Vox Media approaches audience insights, the logistical hurdles of shooting raw talent in diverse locations, and how they manage to find the perfect balance between local narratives and a unified global strategy. Now let's roll. Welcome back to the Branded Content That Works podcast. Today we're looking at what it takes to build impactful brand partnerships on a massive international scale. My guest on this episode is Hayley Anne Sharp. She's Managing Director of Global Brand Partnerships at Vox Media. Hayley resides in London, where she leads their international team, and she brings an incredible case study today, Vox's latest work with the European Commission. We'll take a behind-the-scenes look at how they brought this partnership to life and how to tell complex, important stories through engaging content. But Hayley, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This is definitely a fun way to start my morning. But yeah, as you said, I'm Hayley. I'm the MD of Vox Media International, where I've been here for just under 12 years, which has absolutely flown by. But Vox Media, who we are, what we stand for, and the work we do, we're really known as the modern day media publisher because really all of our content is built for discovery. I think we really recognize that today the landscape is incredibly fragmented, and consumers, if you just think about how you and I or anyone listening to this show think about seeking out content or engaging with content, it's so different to how it was if we were sat here a couple of years ago and having this conversation.
Yes.
It's shifted a huge amount. And I think, at Vox Media, we recognize that, today we're all encountering content through feeds, through platforms, through communities. And so we really think about how do we create stories, experiences, and really conversations that are designed to travel across the world, but probably more importantly, to spark deep cultural moments. We always talk about Vox Media as our sort of credo of igniting culture and inspiring action. We really want to create conversation, spark action, and really get audiences talking on a global scale. I don't know whether you've seen any of the content that we've created most recently, but probably one of my favorite examples is The Cut, which is one of our editorial brands under New York Magazine, actually coined the term Nepo Baby, which just went and completely exploded.
Everybody knows that term these days, right?
Everyone knows that. It just actually got added to the Cambridge Dictionary as well, which felt very cool, even though I had absolutely nothing to do with it. It gives you probably a little bit of an indication of just how on the pulse we are when it comes to popular culture and thinking about connecting in with audiences worldwide. And I think, I love that because we just are able to really think about how do we look at audience insights on a really deep level? How do we then think about platform first storytelling? And how do we create conversations that ultimately matter to audiences all over the world? And so really what I do is partner with all of our internal teams to try and then translate these stories for our brand partners. We're really fortunate. We're going to talk a little bit about the European Commission today, which is probably one of my favorite campaigns we've done. But we work with hundreds of clients and think about how do we leverage that storytelling on an international scale. And so I look after everything from our sales teams to our creative team to our account managers and client services, really to make sure we have that same sort of best-in-class service and storytelling to come to life for our brands and our partners. So hopefully the conversation today will give a little bit of an indication of how we do that.
It sounds a bit like when you state that, it sounds a bit complex, the role that you have within. You are more or less global these days, aren't you?
I am. We do have a team that are based in the UK as well, doing sort of domestic regional sales. And we do have sort of little pockets of teams in other regions as well. But a lot of the work that we do and that I and my team really specialise on is that sort of international multi-market conversation. I think, again, every few years we see clients shift from sort of being local focused to global focused. But I think more and more as the social world becomes globally connected and, geo boundaries are removed on a landscape perspective, we're seeing more and more global conversations happening. So that's really the sweet spot that we sit in.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into today's case, I've challenged you to share a little anecdote with us. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know what? I loved this because it really put me thinking about what a good career anecdote to be. And there's been a couple over the years, but there's one that probably actually really sticks with me. And I'm actually going to go all the way back to when I very first started in this industry. And I was probably about 2021 at the time. And I was interviewing for what then was Hachette Philippachi, which at the time owned brands like Elle, Red, Elle Decoration, which seemed really glamorous at the time, being a 21-year-old. And I interviewed for a sales role, and I wasn't one of these people that had, always dreamed of working in sales. I really just loved magazines, and I knew I wasn't going to be an editor. So I wanted to try and sort of find another way into the industry. And so I was doing this interview, and it was, it was going pretty well. I was kind of like quietly confident, thought it was doing okay. And then right at the very end of the interview, the HR manager picked up a pen and said, okay, the final task is to sell me the pen. And, today everyone knows this is the sort of famous Wolf of Wall Street test that everyone's familiar with. And it is as horrendous as it sounds when you're doing it. But, back then I'd never heard of it. I'd never come across this sort of sales test before.
Dear.
Oh, I remember being completely blindsided. And I remember sort of just staring at this pen and, we're talking like a biro. It wasn't like some Mont Blanc, really lovely pen with features that you could try and pitch in. It was just a really standard biro. And I remember just completely panicking. And then going back to thinking about why I was there and this just absolute love of magazines that I had. And so I think I said something along the lines of, you work for a magazine company and magazines are all about ideas, and the pen is the thing that sort of turns the ideas into articles into magazines, and magazines into sales. So, without the pen, really, none of us would be sitting here having the conversation. So you need to buy the pen. And looking back, it's obviously complete nonsense, but I think I delivered it with, enough confidence and enthusiasm that she laughed and bought it because I got the job. But I think for me, actually, what's interesting about the part of the story is that actually the selling the pen or delivering something with confidence isn't actually what I learned the most out of the interview, because the funny part is the HR manager that actually gave me that crazy task ended up becoming one of my closest friends. And actually years later, she was maid of honor at my wedding. And so the lesson I learned actually wasn't about the pen selling or the task of being prepared for the unknown. It's actually more that our careers are based on relationships, and, the jobs, the titles, the companies, they all come and go. But the people that you meet along the way are often the ones that end up being the most important part of our journey. And so it's nurturing those relationships, and it's focusing on those relationships that really matter. And, very occasionally the person that makes you sell a pen in an interview will end up standing next to you in the aisle. And that's the piece that probably always stuck with me. And she'll love that she's getting a shout out in this podcast.
And every year you get a tiny pen for Christmas, right? from your girlfriend.
Exactly.
Let me also add, I think this is a very good image of the difference between you and I, because where you would be able to sell this, I would potentially be looking at a pen going, maybe I could use this as a microphone. And that's why you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, right?
Exactly. And I've never to this day made anyone do an interview with me and make them sell a pen.
Well, lovely. Thank you so much for that anecdote, Hayley. Let's move on to today's, I would say, the core of today's episode, because you are bringing one of the most interesting campaigns that I've seen this year. Also a bit, I don't know if you can say untraditional, but it's not everyone who gets to work with the European Commission, so that alone is quite interesting. I think maybe we should start with you just giving an overview of the campaign, and then let's dive into the nitty-gritty of it all, the pitching and the selling and all that jazz.
Yeah, sounds good. So this is a partnership that, as I said, we worked with the European Commission, and we just won a Native Advertising Institute Award for it. So we were really delighted.
Yes, you did.
With that. So thank you very much to all the judges that voted. But I really love this project because it puts storytelling at the center. You know, I think so often with campaigns and in branded content, we always talk about how do you find this balance of juggling client KPIs and sort of what their real need is, and making sure the brand and the tonality comes through. And in this case, quite strict sort of protocols, but balancing that with the editorial positioning and really what we know will work from our audience. And we always talk about this in the vein of 1 + 1 = 3. We know audiences, we know consumers and how they engage in social first content, but our partners really know all of the internal mechanics and what their brand ambitions are. And so how can we combine those knowledge sets to get content that's really rich and engaging and will ultimately perform, for both sides? And I think this partnership is a really great example of it. And so we partnered with the European Commission on a 3-part documentary series called Of the Future, which followed the lives of 3 young people who have really been transformed through funding from the European Commission and one of their very specific strategies, which is called the Global Gateway Initiative. And that was all based on looking at how do they put funding into infrastructure and economic development within sort of key regions.
Yeah.
And so we actually shot this, and I think you might know this, but across 3 countries, El Salvador, South Africa, Bangladesh, which we can talk a little bit about because they're not necessarily...
just add the complexity. Come on.
Exactly. Not necessarily the easiest to shoot in, and we can chat about this, but we actually shot in Bangladesh a couple of weeks after a 6-week-long blackout in the region. So trying to coordinate production logistics was one of the more challenging things that you don't see when you see the final product. It keeps you on our toes. So it was an interesting challenge that we could chat about. But we did 3 videos, and I think probably what's most interesting, and hopefully anyone listening, we can maybe share the links to the video in the show notes or something. But
we definitely can.
Lovely. But we actually used an internal team at Vox Media called Story Hunters, which at some point in my career, I need to figure out how to get on that team because I really want that job title on my CV. It's just very cool. But they are a team that go out and basically uncover really unique, really different stories and bring them to life in a way that you just wouldn't necessarily think about or have seen. They're probably most well known because it's actually the team behind the Oscar-winning film Argo with Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Seen that?
Yeah.
Yes. Amazing film. So they're actually the team that found that story. We went on and sold it, and it became the movie that it is. So the team are incredibly talented, I would say, at doing that role. It's probably why they've not hired me for the team, because that would not be my skill set. But they basically travel all over the world and sort of find these really untold stories and think about how do you bring them to life in a really compelling way. And so we, with the European Commission, wanted to partner, knowing we had these sort of 3 regions to shoot in, and find these stories of just extraordinary individuals who are really utilizing the investment from the European Commission to really champion human journeys and think about the community impact that they're able to really build within their regions. And so we sort of came up with 3 different stories that we can talk a little bit through. But probably what I want to know is actually, this is the perfect example of that 1 + 1 philosophy, because the clients from the outset just embrace this mindset of true collaboration and working with our teams. Particularly when you are working with more of a government initiative, there are a lot of stakeholders. There are a lot of sign-off points, which anyone working on this, listening to this partnership or podcast will probably know. There's a lot of different sort of stakeholders that you've got to get approval on, but they were so collaborative and so open to sort of hearing our expertise and really where we thought the stories were that would really matter, that would kind of come to the table. And so I can talk a little bit about what those 3 videos are and the stories, if it's useful, and sort of bring that to life. So the first video, we followed a South African entrepreneur, Dandisa, who was really focused on providing environmental impact and really looking at the economic opportunity that goes hand in hand when you're working on environmental projects and initiatives. And so he is taking on some of South Africa's biggest sustainability challenges and really thinking about how do you create a pathway for the next generation to get into the green economy. He does a huge amount with his own business, but also going into schools within South Africa and doing a lot of education, training and development within the region, and sort of bringing that story to life. And he's just also a wonderful human all round. We actually went on to go and premiere that video at the South African Film Festival, which was very cool to do.
Hopefully very well received.
It was. And just a really cool thing to do when you're thinking about branded content projects. Sometimes we can think about them just in relatively silo, but actually thinking about that bigger picture and all the promotional materials that came with it was just very cool. So I'll send that around and you can have a look at that as well. But from there, we then went to Bangladesh for our second video, and we met a lady called Reshma, who is a female entrepreneur. And Bangladesh is a really interesting region because women in the workforce is relatively low, and only around about 7% of small businesses are actually owned by women in the region. So we wanted to create a film that was really inspiring and that focused on how do we break boundaries and how do we think about showcasing creating a thriving business and how other women can actually get into owning small businesses. But how do we tell that story with heart, with purpose, and with emotional connection that is really going to engage with that sort of next generation of female potential business owners and leaders? And I think the production team did a phenomenal job at bringing her story to life in a way that really connected with not only people within the Bangladesh region, but all over the world. And then our third video, we went to El Salvador and we met a digital artist called Valeria, who is utilizing 3D design and AI to really build a career in the digital economy. So she's looking at everything from digital skills to connectivity to bringing that through a mentorship lens to future generations and sort of how do the next generation thrive utilizing sort of that digital economy and digital skills. And I think all of the stories are really well told, but I think why I love the project so much is because each of the different talent have gone on to win various awards off the back of the project. The campaign absolutely smashed the benchmarks, which we can chat a little bit about. But for me, it's more about the stories with heart. I think when you look at the video content and you really watch the programming, the connection between the individual talent and the audiences really comes through, and it's so rare that you get to work on a project that actually really has human impact and human connection. And I just thought, I mean, the team just did a brilliant job at it. I'm obviously slightly biased, but
and I've seen them too, and I have to say, you will have a heart of stone if you don't instantly fall in love with the 3 personalities that you have chosen to depict in this campaign. Like, I know you're not usually allowed to cuss, but this is my podcast, so I would say they are all genuinely badass and very important stories to be told. So congrats on hunting those stories down.
Thank you. And I will credit the team fully for it. But no, you're absolutely right. The talent themselves were just phenomenal and just such a joy to work with. And again, a huge credit to the client as well for being so collaborative and really letting us sort of find those really unique and insightful stories.
I would also say from an outside perspective, the personalities that you've chosen to depict in these stories, at least 2 of them do not come across as extroverts. They would not be the loudest people in the room, and they wouldn't potentially be people that would put themselves forward whenever there was an occasion for it. So for you to be able to both find the stories, but also be able to get them to tell their stories, so it came out in the way it ended up coming out, I think that in itself is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think a huge amount of what we do, and actually it's interesting on that because we had a little bit of back and forth with the client on one of our talent in particular, where exactly to your point, in some of the pre-interviews, they felt maybe the talent was a little bit more reserved. We felt so confident in the story and how we would be able to sort of draw that out of them, that we really pushed the client on sort of trusting our expertise. And we went and flew out a few days early, and we actually sat in the living room of her family's home, connected with her one-on-one in a very informal setting, but that really built a lot of confidence and really built the trust and the connection with the production team. That meant when we came to shoot, she actually almost felt like we'd been welcomed into her home and into her circle, and really felt so much more relaxed than in any of the pre-interviews or even when we first arrived. And so we're really, I'd say, cognizant about when we're filming with what we would call a little bit more raw talent, but really real talent, about how do you make them feel comfortable? Because exactly to your point, these aren't media trained execs or people that have got scripts that you can,
or influencers that you traditionally see. Quite a few brands tend to jump on that bandwagon when we talk branded content. So this is I would say a somewhat risky move.
Yeah,
but it also seems like it paid off big time.
That's exactly it. And I think particularly you hit on, the influencers and how do you have human connections. But I think particularly in this world of AI that we're all living in, and it's such a big conversation within our industry at the moment, the piece that always wins is human stories, because ultimately we always want to connect on a human level. And so if you're able to really get into the bones of that, that's really when you can see success. And I think the teams did a really good job on that.
Amen. Now, let me just go back a little. You said that the European Commission, they came to you with this pitch, or how was that in terms of like the pitching and selling process?
Yeah.
They were the ones approaching you guys?
They did. It was sort of a conventional pitch process, whereby we, received an RFP. We delved into the briefing documents where we thought we could really add a huge amount of value, which was through this story hunt and our team, Epic Studios. And then we pitched in sort of what the opportunity was. We are always cautious when we're going through what we call the pre-sale phase, but really before we've had to sign off on a project, of giving illustrative examples of story hunts. But there's so much work that goes into finding those exact talent that we can't always do it in the upfront.
You can't use AI for that, at least not yet.
Exactly. So we always sort of provide thought starters. But I think the team just at the European Commission and ICF, which was the agency, just really bought into what we could bring to the table, and actually were really open to that collaborative journey and really understood the value that the human storytelling could bring. But yeah, it was a very typical sort of conventional RFP process at the start, I would say.
And in terms of, both the pitching and the planning process, but also the production, very much like the time frame for this, like I in my head at least, there is a fair bit of complexity to this campaign. Not only are you working with the European Commission, so I could imagine, and I think you touched on that a bit earlier, the grey eminences just lying up from within. There is an opinion about what the budget should be spent for. And then just to add to it, they've chosen 3 different locations in 3 different parts of the world. So from a project management perspective and a time perspective, like how long does it take to produce a campaign like this? And, I don't know if you can say what's the complexity level from a 0 to 10.
But how do we rank? Yeah, I'll answer the first part first. So in terms of the timescale, this often varies on clients. We often get asked this. We have sort of standardized timelines for all of our sort of different projects, but as with anything, it sort of evolves as you go through. This project in total ended up been just over a year from when we first started pre-production all the way through to sort of going live with the final video. As I said, there were some nuances with Bangladesh being offline for a couple of months, which threw the timescales out completely. But we are really collaborative, that actually, although we've got timelines, they're really agile and they move, you know, in accordance with the client and what their needs are. I think it's connecting to your second part there around the complexity, because this was probably one of the more complex projects we worked on, mainly because, as I said, you've got sort of multiple different stakeholders, not only sort of the European Commission that are predominantly based out in Belgium, but you also then have the delegates and the regional leads in each country who really want to also have you know, share their opinion and make sure that it feels right for the market, and that you're sort of really bringing that local to global storytelling approach to life. And so things even as basic as coordinating time zones for a call can be challenging. And then also, you know, making sure that everyone is speaking the same language, that you are making sure that you want that you're still sort of marrying that line between having the local story really resonate, but making sure that it connects with audiences from all over the world, and sort of finding that balance point. So yeah, it was definitely one of the more complex ones, but as I said earlier, you know, we're really fortunate that the clients were so open to collaboration on this one, that it really worked because everyone was willing to sort of take each other's expertise. Whereas I think on some projects, it can be a little bit harder if, you know, we're trying to be really adamant from an editorial perspective on what works, or a client's got a really clear vision on sort of what would work for their brand. It can be a little bit more tricky. But with this one, I do think we found a really good balance.
And you actually just mentioned another keyword of mine that I have on my list when saying audiences. Now, I've done a bit of homework on this case as well, and I know that one of the ambitions was to reach 18 to 35-year-olds in the local markets. So again, tied to the complexity. In terms of publishing and distribution, how did you manage? Because yeah, I know social media might have been playing a role, but in terms of media consumption, it's so different parts of the world. Is it the same, or did you have to dive a little deeper and choose to pivot in certain places and choose different formats and mediums?
Yeah, it's the latter. We definitely did different distribution tactics per region. So TikTok in Bangladesh, for example, isn't really a platform that we can utilize. And so we really looked at our distribution on an individual regional level. So when we're thinking about those three key regions, and then also thinking about that global distribution line of what sort of resonates in a more globally connected world. So we pivoted the strategy both actually mid-campaign from the learnings of the first video, which was South Africa that went live, but then also sort of had a really defined targeting strategy for each region around what platforms work, what audiences really connect with the content, and even things down to contextual targeting. The bulk of the campaign was predominantly social, but actually what was interesting when we did the post-campaign analysis is that we had the strongest resonance often from the Vox Media owned and operated audiences on our sites. And
that's awesome.
Which is really, really good. So I think it's always about finding the balance between leveraging the platforms and the scales and the distribution that they have, and thinking about that social first storytelling, but also not forgetting your own audiences as a publisher, and ultimately why consumers continue to connect with us. So a little bit of a balance.
Interesting. Now let's dive into the essentials here as well, the results, because, you know, we can do beautiful, brilliant brand storytelling, but if it's not working, then
it's irrelevant.
But I think you said it a bit earlier, and that's also why, like, disclaimer, you won an award. You don't win awards if the results are not backing up the good stories here, right?
Totally. And I have to say, we were just thrilled with this campaign because we exceeded all benchmarks across every region, which I cannot tell you how rare that is in transparency of this Circle of Trust podcast. To hit sort of every benchmark in every region is really something that's quite astounding, and we were just absolutely delighted by it. Again, when we look at some of those sort of broader metrics around brand uplift and brand affinity and some of those perception shifts, which again can be really difficult to do, we actually just exceeded and sort of saw pretty significant uplifts. So the campaign ended up performing really well on both that what I would call more transactional level, but also on some of those broader pieces as well when we're thinking about brand affinity and perception. And so it actually performed incredibly well, which is why it's one of my favorite case studies and favorite children to have worked on.
And I'm curious, Hayley, because obviously this is a brand awareness campaign first and foremost, but did it have any unexpected learnings or even, results coming from it? Were there any CTAs that you did not intend to have as part of your KPIs that ended up being kind of in parallel?
The main one that we often always think about with global projects is, because we always do edits that are in multiple different languages. And on the client side, I think we thought that maybe the local language content would do much better in the local regions. But actually what we found was the English speaking language across all regions and on our global initiative continued to do the best. So that was always a really interesting learning. And for them, thinking about how do they just focus on story first and not necessarily on sort of that real regional approach. Sometimes it's really interesting. We don't always have a cut and dry answer, to be candid. For Vox Media, our editorial brands are all in English. It is obviously one of the most commonly spoken languages. And so audiences connect with our content in English anyway. But sometimes we don't know. And I think it's also okay to say, we don't know why this is, but for your audience in particular, they really connected. It's probably got something to do with the target audience of being that slightly younger demographic who are looking at progression, are connecting with sort of English speaking content. But
yeah,
I wish I could give you it's exactly because of this reason, but sometimes it's really nuanced.
Yeah. And what about the European Commission? Like in the future, are there any things in the pipeline where where you see them coming back saying, okay, we've done the brand awareness campaign, let's move further down the funnel. Like, what can we do next? Or was this a one-off?
No, I mean, we're certainly hoping to work with them again on other projects. For them, it really is about sharing the story and more of that transactional ROI that sort of maybe, more conventional clients are shifting towards. But it's really much more about how do you drive the awareness and how do you showcase the initiatives that they're working so hard and diligently on.
Was there anything in this project that you wish you had done differently?
Oh, that is a great question. Potentially had a different region other than Bangladesh at the time, just because that was really very difficult. At one point we were really touch and go whether we'd even be able to get boots on the ground to shoot there. At the time, there's just a lot of unrest in the region. But actually, looking back now with hindsight and having done it, I actually think it's one of the strongest videos.
It's an amazing story. Yeah.
It's really strong. Reshma was just, phenomenal to partner with. So it was definitely one of the more challenging production shoots that we've done, but equally probably one of the most rewarding.
I could go on talking about this campaign, but I think for now, let's leave it at this. I'm going to add links to the campaigns if anybody out there is curious to dive a little deeper and see what it is that we're talking about here. I would strongly advise people to do so because it is indeed a very, very, very beautiful and very important campaign. Hayley, before I let you go, there is... I like rituals. You know this by now. So before I let you go, we have one more question on today's podcast, and that is, if you and I were to meet in a karaoke bar, what would your karaoke song be?
And do you know what? I don't think I actually told you this, but I love this question because I always ask it in interviews, and I ask people to then connect it back into the media industry and the brand and content world that we live in. So no one ever asked me it back. So I was really happy that you're asking me this. So my song would be Journey, Don't Stop Believing. One, because I actually just love the song. I think it's just
it's good.
It's a classic. But when I then think about connecting it into our industry, because I'm going to do the same thing. Anyone that's interviewed me probably hates me for asking it, so I'll do it back to myself. But there's a line in it that says, don't stop believing, hold on to that feeling. And I think why it's so impactful is I think when you work in an industry like ours, which is ever changing, constantly evolving, you have to keep on believing in what we're doing in the industry that we work in and really hold on to that excitement, because I truly think we're so lucky to work in this industry and in this branded content world. And so it's a real privilege to get to do it. And so if you keep believing in, the brands that you're working on and really hold on to that excited feeling, there's just so much opportunity available. And so I always love that karaoke song, one, because it's just a great tune, and two, because of that line in particular.
I love that. And mind you, I will be adding it to the Branded Content That Works podcast.
Perfect.
Lists, yeah. So one of these days, right?
It'll be on there.
Yes. Well, Hayley, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a true pleasure. And I'm sure we'll catch each other out and about quite soon. But for now, thank you so much.
Sounds good. And thanks so much for having me.
That's it for today's episode. If you like what you've heard, please take a quick second to hit that like and subscribe button right now. Leaving a review or sharing this episode with a colleague helps us keep bringing you the behind-the-scenes stories of the world's absolute best branded content. Now, if today's conversation got you thinking about your own strategy and you're curious about how to get involved with the absolute best community in our industry, you need to check out the Native Advertising Institute. Becoming an NAI member gives you access to a global network of elite storytellers, cutting-edge case studies, and unbeatable insights. Head over to nativeadvertisinginstitute.com to find out how to join us. I'm Stina Holdengard. Thank you so much for listening to Branded Content That Works. And keep believing in what we do in this industry. I'll see you in the next episode.